We're back with Ryan from Carson Law, chatting today about title searches, what a title search is, and then what are some common problems and what happens when you stumble across these things. I think for a lot of first-time buyers or first-time investors, sometimes you just never even think about title insurance. It's something that just a lawyer tells you you're going to kind of have to need to get, so you get it. And if things go smoothly, you really never think about it, but it's actually there to protect us, right? As purchasers.
Yeah, 100%, 80 to 95% of the time we do a title search and it's uneventful, which is good, right? We want it to come back nice and simple and easy. And, we just continue to go about our business and everybody buys and sells their real estate. So what is, like, when we say we do a title search, like, what is that, right? Like,
what is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with Ryan from Carson Law. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, man, how you doing? I'm glad to be here.
I'm doing well. And so looking forward to chatting today about title searches. So I'm sure we'll cover kind of high level what a title search is for anyone that's unfamiliar. And then what are some common problems and what happens when you stumble across these things. I think for a lot of first-time buyers or first-time investors, sometimes you just never even think about title insurance. It's something that just a lawyer tells you you're going to kind of have to need to get, so you get it. And if things go smoothly, you really never think about it, but it's actually there to protect us, right? As purchasers.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, title searches and, what can go wrong or come up bad, that sort of thing. We can go through and talk briefly about, some of those things that we see maybe more frequently. I mean, the good news is there aren't often a lot of title searches that render, issues or problems or terrible things, right? So that's good. Like, 80 to 95% of the time we do a title search and it's uneventful, which is good, right? We want it to come back nice and simple and easy. And, we just continue to go about our business and everybody buys and sells their real estate, right? But as you alluded to, there can be moments where there's a problem or a real big issue. And in which case, one possible solution for us is the applicability and possible application of title insurance. And as you alluded to, title insurance is something that I think a lot of people get irritated that, you got to pay an extra couple hundred, or maybe depending on your transaction, if it's a really, if it's an expensive one or it's multi-res or commercial, sometimes that title insurance policies creeping up into the thousands as opposed to just kind of staying in the, hundreds of dollars with like a single family real estate transaction. But I mean, title insurance really is more about just fraud now. Like originally it was just kind of brought in to be insurance to protect people if there was fraud, and more particularly protect the bank if you've got a mortgage from, a fraudulent buyer, seller, or mortgage being registered, right? And it still does that, but it's certainly grown to be far more robust than it was when it started, over a decade ago, right? But I mean, maybe we should back up and explain, first of all, like, so what is, like, when we say we do a title search, like, what is that, right? Like, so what possibly could be a problem with title? So when we talk about a title search, basically in Ontario, we'll just use Ontario as an example because that's where I'm licensed. The province is subdivided into all these different regional offices, and they're all basically governed by the Land Registry Office, a division of the Ontario government, completely responsible for the safekeeping and the guarding of titles of property in Ontario. So this registration system has almost entirely moved online. So lawyers don't have to go into the regional offices anymore like they had to prior to me practicing. I've been fortunate that almost all of the dealings we have are electronically based. So I can just jump on my computer and search everything and view everything through a secured system like online, right? And so titles are all registered electronically now as well. Most people's ownership, the deeds of their properties are all dealt with, electronically and through the electronic system as opposed to a paper-based system anymore, right? So when a lawyer says they're doing a title search or they've got a title issue, what they're doing is they're searching that system. So Matt, if you're my client and you give me an agreement of purchase and sale, and that agreement of purchase and sale is for 123 Smith Street, and so I search the property in the system and the title comes up. And so it's basically all the registered instruments and documents under that particular 123 Smith that the government's office has for it, right? Related to the ownership only. So that's important to know. We're talking about just what would be on ownership, right? Because that's all this system is really built to handle. It doesn't, people ask like, oh, does the title search look at, other liens that might exist for things like, building code violations and zoning and work orders and fire code and all this sort of stuff? No, that's all has to be separately searched. And we call those off title searches because those have to be done outside of the system or off the system with the city and the municipalities where the property is. So the title search is only the title, the deed, basically. What's the history that's happened from owner to owner with this property? And so this search will commonly allow us to look for things like, are there mortgages against the property that are going to have to be dealt with? Are there CRA income tax liens? Are there construction liens, mechanic liens? Is there what's called a caution against title? Is there a security interest? Notice of security interest is normally found with like companies that do like rentals of furnaces, hot water tanks, air conditioners. So the house has this equipment in it, a hot water tank, furnace, and air conditioner, but it's not owned by the homeowner. It is a rental that a company owns. And so they register an interest against the property called security interest. So you couldn't just rip it out, replace it with your own purchase stuff, and then that company's equipment and everything is just discarded without their knowledge and being paid, right?
Right.
So there's these sorts of things that you would find on title from an instrument point of view. So people ask us like, what's the difference between a mortgage and a line of credit being registered on title? From the registration point of view, nothing. Like mortgages, lines of credit, home equity plans, whatever the bank wants to call them, from a marketing point of view, from the bank's point of view, it's all registered with one name, which is called a charge. So if you look at a title search and it says charge, that's got to be a mortgage or a line of credit or a home equity plan, something like that, right? And so those are on title. Deeds are actually called transfers now. So whenever there's a change in ownership or a new person registered to title, you'll see a registration of a transfer, right?
Right.
That's what the deed is. I already talked about like notice of security interest, and then those liens that I listed. Like the most common one we normally see is something registered by the government. Typically, somebody's maybe behind on their taxes or HST payments, so they register a CRA lien. So that is something that you could see on title that would need to be dealt with if you were buying or selling, right? And then other less common liens that you could see, but liens nonetheless, would be like a construction lien. And so construction liens are basically something that contractors can register when they're not paid. So if I was buying from you, Matt, and you rent out the house, but you thought, oh, I'm going to be smart and not pay the trades and just get out of here. Well, if they registered construction liens against the property, that means it has to be paid, because you wouldn't be able to transfer the property to me without the lien being dealt with. Right? Because I don't want to buy the property subject to the lien, because now I have to pay the lien. So I don't want to do that. Right? And then there's some other liens too, like there's like a mechanics lien and stuff, which they're just further subcategories of like the construction lien, right? One other thing that happens when we do like a title search, and it's not directly like built into the actual search itself, but it's just a common like extra add-on that most lawyers do that are familiar with real estate. They do what's called a writ search, which is a search in the system, but it's sort of secondarily in the system to title. And it's a search that pulls up whether or not there's anybody with a similar name to Matt McKeever who got sued, right? Or did Matt get sued?
Yeah.
And does Matt have a court order with a judgment owing against him, right? So if I was buying from you and I had my lawyer do a search and they do the writ as well, and it pulls up, oh, Matt McKeever or one of his companies, is coming up in the court system, and it's saying, Matt owes $50K. Well, my lawyer is going to be writing to yours to say, is this Matt? And if it is, we need this dealt with too, because we can't have the property acquired without the writ being dealt with, right? So those are like some common things that we kind of see when we do the title searches. I'd say they make up like 90+% of like, the things we need to deal with on a more like routine basis. But other things that come out of title searches, which become more problematic or complicated to solve, are boundary line and access issues. And these become these are really more common with like more rural properties or maybe older properties that have seen a lot of subdivision or like carve offs. Cottages are very popular for these as well, because a lot of times the same attention to detail from the people who are keeping these records in the registry system haven't they haven't done as good a job, generation to generation having the title kept, right? And there can be human error in anything because humans are processing the system. Sometimes, the boundary lines in the description that describes the lot you're buying in the title system is not properly brought forward. And now you've got like a gap in the boundaries of the property. So it's, we have to report to the client that we've got your east and your north and your south, borders all clearly delineated, but the west isn't connecting back up. Where there's like 10 feet where we don't know, like we don't know what you own there. Right? There's something missing, right? And so boundary lines can be something that pops up again, thankfully, not a lot, like not frequently. And usually in these properties that are quite old or have seen lots of like subdivision on them, or they've been re-boundary lined because of surveys or whatever. There's also, this is common with like a lot of the cottages or like larger rural properties, like maybe farms and stuff like that, right? But you can see it, like, we do find it in urban areas. Usually it's in older parts of cities, like older areas, like say, where you are in London or like Toronto, like some of the older areas,
the downtown cores,
potentially like Hamilton, stuff like that. Like some of those older areas that are less developed, like have kind of been forgotten. Those ones kind of get, because they've been forgotten by development that we can see, they sometimes are also forgotten in just the paper title as well, and so they're messier, right? Sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes, right? So boundary lines is an issue that we sometimes and frequently might have to deal with a title search. And then the last one is like access. How do you access the property, and like, is there actually, can we see access from the title search? So 9 times out of 10, like if I'm buying a property from you and it's literally in the city limits of London, well, the street's probably abutting one of the boundary lines of your property, right? And then that street connects to, another street and so forth, right? So we can see very quickly and easily, okay, there's vehicular and pedestrian access here, right? But what happens if we do the title search and it's landlocked, right? What if there isn't technically this vehicular or pedestrian access component, right? Or what if it's a cottage property where, you know, these properties have, you know, been handed down through the family, and it's like the grandfather started it, then he gave like 2 lots from the original lot to like his 2 kids, and then they had 2 kids, and so now it's like in like 8 lots, right? And unfortunately, to get to like the original lot, like you have to cross over all the lots. But if you didn't create rights of way or easements over all the lots when you broke them up, now you've got the inner lots being landlocked, so you can't get to them, right? So those are other things that we have to commonly be checking when we do the title searches, to make sure, you know, people actually have the ability to use a vehicle to get to the property, if that's the expectation, and or pedestrian access, right? And so at the end of the day, those would be like the main things we're looking for. We're looking for like, what dings to title are there from like a security standpoint of like charges, liens, security interests. We're looking at, you know, boundary lines. Are you getting, you know, what you believe you're buying from a dimensions point of view? And is there like access, and what kind of access is there, right? I guess the last one we kind of look at too is, and it might seem more evident, but this has happened, you know, are the people who are selling it actually the owner?
I've had that happen once, and it was a very frustrating experience.
Yeah. And usually there's a logical explanation. Like usually it's the person selling it is a power of attorney, or maybe it's an estate scenario, like those sorts of things. I mean, the only other thing, like if you start to run out of logical explanations and answers to it, is that you might be dealing with a fraud, right? And in which case you want to report that and run away. But thankfully, knock on wood, never had that issue be the case at this point. But those are the common things that we kind of see with title searches and that we have to kind of deal with. I'd say again, thankfully, 90+% are pretty clean titles, or are usual things that we can easily deal with as lawyers, with like undertakings and everything, like paying out a mortgage. That's easy. Like we do that 90% of the time on every deal, right?
Yeah.
And just do it with solicitor undertakings and stuff. But where you start to run into issues is like those access components, the boundary lines and dimensions. Those are the ones that particularly start to create like more difficulty in solving them. And that's where, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the title insurance companies, especially if you're dealing with a real estate lawyer who does real estate, they typically have really strong relationships with their reps at the title insurance companies. And so I don't want to say they'll, you know, do you a favor or something, but they'll potentially give you more latitude and lenience to like expand coverage on the different title insurance policies with a custom rider or whatever, to make it so that, hey, we're not telling you that you can make a claim right when you move in, and we're going to pay for you to get a brand new survey if there's a boundary issue. But if something comes up and you need to file a claim because the neighbor's trying to, you know, say they own this part, and you're saying, no, we believe we do. Well, if that, for example, happens, then you can make a claim. Title insurance will cover the cost of the legal and the survey work, and we'll get it all tidied up, and boom, and you'll either own what you think you did, or find out, you know, maybe you didn't. And but at least you know your definitive boundary lines, right? Or sometimes title insurance can even be used if there's been a misrepresentation to acquire the land that you thought was yours, but turns out it's your neighbor's, right? So it's very case by case, and it's very dependent on the type of policy and the coverage of the title insurance. but it can certainly be, it could be an ace in your pocket. It could definitely help you solve a problem that without title insurance could be very expensive, very stressful, very time consuming. They won't always cover everything, but hopefully they do cover it.
Yeah, really appreciate that comprehensive breakdown. And I guess just to kind of summarize for anyone that's kind of sitting at home, as far as how these issues often get resolved, I'm guessing with a lot of the liens and mortgages and stuff, if they can't be resolved under the normal closing period, oftentimes there's just kind of an extension, right? In order until it can get wrapped up for it to close. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you'd probably either see a combination of extension, like you said, or sometimes it can be just like solicitors agreeing to holdbacks. So like I'm buying from you again in the example, there's a debt on title that needs to be dealt with, but it can't be dealt with without the sale happening. Like, so your sale proceeds are paying it. Your lawyer undertakes to my lawyer that, from the sale proceeds, I'm going to pay off this $50,000 and give you the registration of it being deleted, right? Or sometimes it can just be a simple, hey, Matt's lawyer is going to hold back money while Matt and his lawyer try to figure it out. And until they figure it out, Matt can't have that 50,000. So extensions, holdbacks, undertakings and holdbacks, title insurance, these things are typically tools that the lawyer can use to try to help figure out and solve the issues, either hopefully before closing or on the day of closing, or like insulate it being resolved post closing.
Yeah, really appreciate you breaking that down for us. And then when we're talking about the accesses or right of ways and things like that, do those sometimes end up actually killing deals when there's issues there, or is there usually a remedy through title insurance? Is there anything that normally stands out as like a true deal killer when we're doing the title searches?
I think a true deal killer is just really case by case. It's because it depends not only on like the context of the deal, like and so forth, but it depends on the client, right? Like certain clients are much more risky and would be more accepting of something even like something that could be a deal killer, whereas others, they're like, there's a mortgage. Oh, I don't even want to close. It's like, okay, don't worry. Like, that's easy peasy. We're just doing an undertaking. There'll be a payout. Like the lawyer's going to take care of it. They're not going to give an undertaking to pay it and discharge it and not do it and then get disbarred. Like they're not going to do that, right? And if they did, their insurance covers it, right? So it's like, don't panic about that kind of thing, right? I mean, I think it's totally case by case because each issue is going to be unique, probably, from deal to deal. Maybe not in its subject matter, like access issues are like there's access issues potentially on lots of deals. But the context and the content of that access issue is going to be unique, right? Like whatever your access issue is probably not going to be the same as your neighbor's access issue, right?
Yeah.
So it's very case by case because of the possible issue, but then also the client too, and their acceptance or aversion to risk, right? So I would say it's very case by case. Thankfully, knock on wood, I've seen very, very few deals, probably less than like a handful in 15 years get killed, right? Like just truly be killed. Yeah. Normally there's a remedy or a solution. Like sometimes the solutions are just abatements of price too. Like sometimes people are like, you know what? This isn't going to get solved like anytime quick. Title insurance isn't going to cover it. I still want to do the deal because of other reasons. So, knock 50K off and I'll close, and it's my problem. I'll deal with it. And if that were the solution, then I would recommend obviously make sure between the lawyers, there's like a mutual release signed like to that component so that, you can't settle for 50,000 and then the person comes after you, a year or two later saying, well, you gave me this piece of land, it's all screwed up and I want stuff from you. because if you gave them a 50 grand credit, you want to know that that's that. Like, they're not coming after you for anything related to the title issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Really appreciate this comprehensive breakdown, Ryan, because I know a lot of people just, title searches, title insurance, all that stuff. There's like, I'm not sure if I really understand it. It can be kind of intimidating when you're looking at your first real estate transaction or your first real estate investment transaction. So again, really appreciate you just sharing your wealth of knowledge. For anyone that wants to reach out to Ryan or anyone on the Carson Law team, we've got links in the video description down below. Really do encourage you guys to reach out. And it's so critical when you're looking at getting a real estate lawyer that someone that you feel comfortable having these sort of conversations with, where you're willing to ask the questions to make sure that you've got the confidence to move forward on your transaction. So again, really appreciate you just sharing all your insights here, Ryan, and looking forward to chatting on the next video.
Thanks a lot. It's always our pleasure. Thanks, guys.